Okay?
Okay.
Okay, cool. All the best. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Yeah, okay, cool then. All the best. Good luck. Let's start.
Thank you.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to the Srijan Wednesday webinars. If you are joining us for the first time, this is a community initiative by Srijan Technologies, where you can tune in to some great sessions on topics ranging from front-end technologies, UI UX, mobile apps, to media, entrepreneurship, community building, and digital marketing. Today's webinar takes us through RubyMotion, an app development environment that helps you build native apps using the Ruby language. We will take a look at how RubyMotion works internally, how it's different from other mobile toolchains, and how we can build cross-platform apps with it. Our speaker today is Laurent Sansonetti. He is from Liège, Belgium, and is the founder of HipByte. He is also the original developer of RubyMotion. He worked at Apple for 7 years as a senior software engineer on both iLife and OS X. At Apple, he maintained the Ruby distribution for OS X and also created the Mac Ruby project. In a previous life, he worked on IDE Pro and was an active contributor to Ruby Cocoa and GNOME. Thanks for joining us, Laurent. And before we start with the session, I would request all participants to please type in any questions that you have during the presentation, and we'll take them up in the last 15 minutes of this session. Also, please don't forget to take the conversation live on Twitter using our hashtag SrijanWW. You can share your thoughts by tagging us and Laurent in your tweets using our handles @Srijan and @LRZ. So without taking up any more time, let's get started. Laurent, over to you.
Hello, everyone. So I'm very happy to be here today with you. So the title of this webinar is Building Full-Fledged Native Apps Using RubyMotion. So I will be talking about that. I would like to actually, before actually starting the presentation, I would like to thank Srijan for inviting me to this Wednesday webinars session. I also want to point out that it's my first webinar. I've done a lot of presentation, but it's my first time actually doing something online. So I hope everything will go well, but if you have any questions, you can type them on the chat and I will get back to them after this presentation. So let's start. So just a little bit about information about myself. My name is Laurent. I'm kind of a software hacker and a company founder. So I created a startup that sells product to developers, and I also work on this product. So I'm doing both software programming and marketing and management, company management. I've been a Ruby programmer since 2002. I switched from Perl to Ruby when I was at university. I kind of realized that I was not able to maintain the code I wrote before. I mean, a few weeks after I wrote them. That was weird. So I switched to a different language, and I've been using Ruby since then. So that's very great. I really love Ruby. I discovered Ruby with the pickaxe book, which is actually on the slide. If you guys don't know, that was the very first book that was available in English, and it was completely free. So it really helped to grow the English-speaking community of Ruby. After that, I worked at Apple for quite some years, about close to 8 years, on various projects from iLife to all the OS X distributions, from Tiger to Mountain Lion. So I maintain the Ruby distribution from Leopard. I also work on low-level OS X and iOS foundations, such as Darwin at the Unix layer. And I started a Mac Ruby project at Apple, which was Apple's implementation of the Ruby language for Mac development. And since 2012, I created my own company called HipByte, and we do RubyMotion. And we also offer consulting services, so if you have any questions about that, you can contact me later. But this presentation's topic is about RubyMotion. So RubyMotion, you probably have heard about it. What is exactly RubyMotion? RubyMotion is a tool chain to write native mobile apps in Ruby. It's very important to mention native here because RubyMotion lets you write the same apps that you would also write in Objective-C, Swift, or Java. So you get true native applications out of RubyMotion. RubyMotion is completely cross-platform. It allows you to create apps for iOS and Android, and also OS X, but people don't really care about OS X these days. But that's also very important. With RubyMotion, you're not tied to one platform. You can target both iOS and Android. RubyMotion is mainly designed for Ruby programmers. When I designed RubyMotion, I designed it with a Ruby programmer mindset. Because Ruby is my favorite language, I designed it so that it would please me. And that's also very important. If you like Ruby, you should also like RubyMotion. And the main idea behind RubyMotion is to provide a consistent experience when you do a cross-platform development for mobile platforms. We want to provide the same experience when you target iOS and Android. So that's very important. If you look at the state of native mobile development today, if you look at iOS and Android, which are the two main platforms, if you compare languages on iOS, you can choose between Objective-C and Swift. So all the iOS APIs are actually written in Objective-C, but Apple allows you to call them with Swift, Apple's new language. So you have to choose between Objective-C and Swift. You can choose whatever language you want. On Android, however, all the APIs are Java. So you have to use Java. You don't have a choice. When it comes to the environment, on iOS, you have to use Apple's IDE, Apple's editor called Xcode. And on Android, you have to use Google's IDE called Android Studio. So again, there are two IDEs here. You have to use Xcode on iOS and Android Studio on Android. And finally, when it comes to the APIs you can use to write your apps, on iOS, you have the iOS SDK, and on Android, you have the Android SDK, which are two separate sets of APIs. So you're kind of stuck. If you want to do cross-platform development today, you have to switch between languages, environments, and APIs. So that's kind of a problem. And with RubyMotion, we try to simplify this a little bit by providing the same language on both iOS and Android, which is Ruby. So you don't have to switch between Objective-C, Swift, or Java. You can use Ruby everywhere, which is great. It also allows you to share code between platforms and also the environment. You can use any editor you like. Your favorite text editor will work, and the terminal. But at the same time, you have two separate API sets as well. So if you target iOS, you need to use iOS-specific APIs. And if you target Android, you need to target Android-specific APIs. So RubyMotion doesn't simplify this yet. Actually, it does. At the end of this presentation, I will talk about it a little bit. But right now, starting from this slide, it doesn't. But it really simplifies the development because you don't have to switch languages and environments. So it makes things way, way simpler. And to understand how RubyMotion works, let's first talk about runtimes. RubyMotion has the concept of unified Ruby runtimes. Runtimes are actually custom implementations of the Ruby language that we wrote for each platform we target. So we have two main implementations of the Ruby language, one that is based on the Objective-C runtime that targets iOS, OS X, tvOS, and watchOS. And we also have one that is based on the Java Virtual Machine that targets Android. So we try to talk a little bit about our implementations of Ruby so that you can have a better idea of how RubyMotion works. For iOS, we actually rewrote RubyMotion. We rewrote Ruby, on top of the same runtime that powers the Objective-C language. You may hear of Objective-C. Objective-C is Apple's de facto language. And Apple also uses Objective-C to describe most of the iOS APIs. Objective-C is a C dialect that has Smalltalk-like features. So it may feel like it's a static language, but actually it's very, very dynamic. And Objective-C as a language is powered by a runtime, the Objective-C runtime. It's a small C library that powers the entire language. And this library is completely public. So we use this library to implement Ruby. So it may sound a bit complicated at first, but the main advantage here is that everything you do in RubyMotion, all the objects that you create are actually Objective-C objects. So when you create classes, when you instantiate objects, or when you create methods, these will actually be Objective-C classes, objects and methods automatically. So and vice versa. In RubyMotion, you can access any class that has been defined in Objective-C. For example, UI button, which is a class defined by Apple in the UI kit framework written in Objective-C. And you can access it as if it was defined in Ruby. So it allows us to completely interface with the platform APIs as no performance expense, because we don't have to convert objects or proxy methods or these kind of things. So it's very efficient. For Android, we did more or less the same thing. We decided to implement Ruby on top of GNI, which is the Java native interface. GNI is the C API of the Java virtual machine. And we decided to do mostly the same as what we are doing on iOS. So everything you do on RubyMotion for Android, all the objects that you create in Ruby are actually going to be Java objects. And it works vice versa as well. From Ruby in RubyMotion for Android, you can access the entire set of Java APIs written by Google. Any Java class, any Java method, any Java object, you can access it as if it was defined in Ruby. So it allows us to completely interface with the platform APIs of Android. And again, there is no performance expense when we do so. We don't have to convert objects or methods. Everything is very native. So that's the concept of unified runtime. We unified the Ruby implementations on top of with the platform runtimes. If you look at the IIS Hello World, this is the very basic Hello World you can have for iOS. And this is the basic IIS Hello World for RubyMotion. So the stuff that you see on screen here, it's a bit verbose. And if you had to write this in Objective-C or Swift, it would be almost the same. This is a line-by-line port of the Objective-C example. Everything that you see here is actually Objective-C calls. For example, UI label.new. UI label is an Objective-C class that we can just instantiate here. Same for label.size2fit. This is an Objective-C method that we call right away. We're able to create a class called appDelegate and provide an implementation for the application did finish launching with option method. This is the callback that will be called when the application starts. So all the stuff that you see here is actually Objective-C APIs, and we can just do everything in Ruby. So that's very cool. Of course, it's still kind of complicated because you need to learn about that. You need to learn about iOS development. What is an application delegate? What is a UI view controller? But as soon as you know that, you can write everything in Ruby instead of Objective-C or Swift. So that makes things simpler. And that's what you get when you start the simulator, of course. Very basic Hello World window. For Android, so the Hello World for Android is way simpler. It's way smaller, of course. And similarly as the iOS example, everything that you see here is a direct port of the Java example. So if you had to write this as Java, it would be mostly the same. It would be a bit longer because Java is more verbose, but overall it would be mostly the same. For instance, Android app activity is a Java class defined by Google in the Android API, and we can just subclass it right away as if it was a Ruby class. But it's not, it's a Java class, but we can just subclass it right away. And we can overwrite the onCreate method. And on our custom implementation, we can call super, as if it was in Ruby. And then we can create a new Android widget text view object. And we can set the text to anything we like. And we can set the content view of our activity to the text. Again. And of course, this is Hello World, so if you have to start the simulator to see that. So static compilation, that's something very very important to mention, that's also very different from the other Ruby implementations that you might be using. Static compilation. RubyMotion is very, very different from CRuby or other Ruby implementations in the sense that we actually statically compile ahead of time Ruby source files into machine code. So we will actually, at build time, so when you actually rake your project, we will convert all the Ruby files of your project into an abstract syntax tree. Then from that, we will generate LLVM language for each of our Ruby syntax. And from that, we will target assembly. So if for example, you work on your Mac and you target the simulator, we will generate code for Intel. If you target code for the device, we will generate code for ARM. So at the end, we get a machine code binary that we can just run on our platform. So it's very different. So RubyMotion doesn't have an interpreter or a virtual machine or bytecode that gets interpreted at runtime. We generate machine code ahead of time statically at build time, and then you run the binary. So in that way, RubyMotion is closer to Objective-C or Java or Swift. So thanks to static compilation, RubyMotion apps are native binaries. For iOS, it generates a native executable. So that's an executable, exactly as Swift or Objective-C. For Android, it generates a GNI native library. This is a shell library built for Linux that will be loaded on demand by our custom Dalvik application. So essentially, it's the same. The entire Ruby source code of your project will be compiled into machine code, into a binary. And obviously, the original Ruby source code is not present in the application bundle. So when you create an application in RubyMotion, you won't see the Ruby files or the Ruby code in the application. If for example, you try to list all the strings of the binary, you won't see the Ruby code. Everything is being compiled into an AST and LLVM language. So it is impossible to retrieve the original Ruby source code based on the application bundle. And also something that's also very important to mention is that by default, RubyMotion apps weight only a couple of megabytes. So we try to generate binaries that are small enough, that are not too big, because there are restrictions, especially on iOS, and applications that are over, I think, a certain number of megabytes. They don't allow you to download them from the App Store, from the cellular network. You have to connect Wi-Fi. So here we try our best to generate apps that weight as minimum as possible, a couple megabyte maximum, so that you don't have to worry about these iOS restrictions. So let's talk about the interface. RubyMotion is entirely driven from the command line. So the main idea is that you use a terminal, and then you can use any editor you like. So you can use Vim or Sublime Text, TextMate, RubyMine, or Emacs. You can use any text editor you like, but you have to use the terminal as well. So RubyMotion doesn't force you to use a specific editor or a specific IDE. You can pick the IDE you like. When you create a new project, you do this by typing motion create. Then you specify the template that you want to use to create a project. So by default, it's iOS, so you don't have to type --template equal iOS. That's going to be the default. But for the sake of this example, I specify all the templates that we have. So you can generate an iOS example, an Android example, or an OS X example. And the syntax is very similar to Rails. You type here, hello, it's going to be a directory that motion create will actually create for you. Then you can cd to the directory and you can start working on your project. So if you go to your project, you will see that there is a rake file that's been created for you. And the rake file by default is very, very small. It's going to be 4 lines maximum. Well, it's going to be more lines because we know if support for bundler, but essentially you will see these 4 lines in your rake file. So we set the name of your project and that's all. The entire configuration of your project is in the rake file. So if you type rake config, you will see the complete project settings. And RubyMotion here will generate sensible default values for all the project configurations. For instance, RubyMotion will try on iOS to determine which provisioning profile you want to use and which code sign certificate you want to use. So that's very cool. And of course, you can override this in your reg file. So if you want to specify a different provisioning profile, you can type app.provisioning profile equal and then the path of the file. It's also important to note that the entire project configuration is there in the reg file. So RubyMotion doesn't generate an Xcode project or an Android Studio project file. Everything is in the reg file, so you don't have to use Xcode or Android Studio. So we have a bunch of tasks to run your project on the iOS emulator. You can type reg. The same for the Android emulator. And then we have reg device, which allows you to push your application on the device. And finally, when you're ready, you can create an application archive for distribution. So you can do this when you're ready to push your application to the App Store or the Play Store for Android, or more specifically, when you want to share your application to other teammates or developers, if you want to use test flights, for example, on iOS. So we have specific tasks for this, and you can use them. And this task will generate an IPA on iOS and an APK on Android. And these are the same files that you would get if you were using Xcode or Android Studio. So let's talk a little bit about RubyMine. RubyMine is RubyMotion's best IDE. It's important to mention that. So I would like to go through a few features of RubyMine that makes a lot of sense for RubyMotion users. A great thing about RubyMine is it has natural autocomplete syntax. So this is great because if you do iOS development, you will see that method names are very, very long. And with RubyMine, it allows you to automatically autocomplete everything for you based on the context. So that's very, very useful. Similarly, RubyMine has inline documentation. So if you need access to documentation from the IDE, you can do that. So that's very cool. It also has refactoring support. So this is of course default in all JetBrains IDEs, but here it's especially useful for RubyMotion. So you can automatically create a method based on the selector, the name of the selector. If you have done some iOS development, you know that iOS has this pattern of target action thing, and RubyMine has support there to create to extract methods based on the name of the selector. So that's very, very interesting. And here, this is probably the main reason why you might be interested in using RubyMine. RubyMine has a point-and-click debugging support to RubyMotion. So with your mouse, you can just visually set breakpoints in your code, and you can run your project, and RubyMine will stop where you set your breakpoint. And from there, you can see all the threads and all the backtraces and inspect the variables. It's important to mention that the debugger also works on the device. So you can also debug applications running on your iOS device. And finally, RubyMine has support for specs. So when you run your spec suite, you will see the results visually. So that's pretty cool. Anyway, that's all about RubyMine. But if you want to know more, you can go to jetbrains.com/ruby/RubyMotion. And from there, you will have more information about the integration in RubyMine. So what's RubyMotion essentially? It's a static ahead-of-time Ruby compiler. So it allows you to create machine code based on Ruby source code. RubyMotion is two runtimes, two implementations of Ruby. One based on Objective-C, so which we use for iOS, OS X, tvOS, and WatchOS development. And one based on Java, which we use for Android development. It has a build system based on rake, the command line, so everything that you know and like. And finally, it has a REPL, which I will show a little bit further. Let's talk a little bit about RubyMotion Starter also. RubyMotion Starter is our free version of RubyMotion. So it's completely free and it's fully featured, so you can target iOS and Android. The only limitation is that it has a splash screen, so all the applications that you create with RubyMotion Starter will have this awesome made with RubyMotion splash screen. And if you want to remove the splash screen, you can subscribe to a paid version. And we encourage you to download RubyMotion on rubymotion.com/download and to get started there. Everything is free, so there is nothing risky to do there. And you can try the platform, and there are no limitations. Another project I would like to mention is Motion Game. Motion Game is our game platform for RubyMotion. Motion Game allows you to create games for iOS and Android using RubyMotion. More specifically, Motion Game is a cross-platform Ruby APIs to write games. So we provide an API that works on all the platforms that we support to write video games. The API that we provide is fully featured, so it has physics, particle, parallax effects, networking APIs, animations. It has the concept of a scene graph and a director. It has sprites, as well as animations, UI widgets, and finally, you can access to the sensor events on the devices. So it's pretty cool, and you can write very nice video games with it. Of course, we didn't write our own video game engine, so we use Cocos 2D for that. Cocos 2D X is a de facto open source framework to write games. It's used by most of the popular games on the iOS App Store and Android App Stores. But it's C++, and so that we actually wrote a Ruby API for it. Thanks to Motion Game, you can have one code base in Ruby, and you can target iOS, tvOS, and Android with only one code base. So that's pretty cool. It's 100% cross-platform, so only one code base will work on all the platforms that we support. And to get started, you need to download RubyMotion first, and then you can just type gem install Motion Game, and that's all. So that's very cool. So we really encourage you to install Motion Game if you want to start video game development and see how it works in Ruby. Now let's talk a little bit about the future of RubyMotion, which is the main topic of this presentation. If we go back to this table here, as you can see, the problem is that we have Ruby as the main language for iOS and Android. We have the editor you like, plus the terminal for the environment, but we still have iOS SDK and Android SDK. So that's the main issue that we are planning to fix in RubyMotion 5. And I will be talking about this now a little bit. So as you can see, if you make a cross-platform app using RubyMotion today, you have to use platform-specific APIs for user interface, and you can share code. So that's great. You can share as much code as you can because Ruby works on iOS and Android. But you have to use platform-specific APIs for each platform you support. You need to learn two sets of APIs on iOS and Android. And of course, you need to maintain two different code bases, one for iOS and one for Android. Even if you can share code, there will be code that you cannot share, code that calls iOS-specific APIs and Android-specific APIs. So that's a problem. So with RubyMotion 5, we intend to fix that by adding another layer on that table. We are going to provide a Ruby framework that is cross-platform and that sits on the iOS SDK APIs and the Android SDK APIs. So this feature is called Flow, and that's the logo we designed for the project. And Flow essentially is a cross-platform framework for RubyMotion. It is the Rails of RubyMotion in our opinion, so that's going to be the future of our product. And basically, Flow lets you have one code base that runs on iOS and Android. So you don't have to have two different code bases anymore, and you don't have to learn two different set of APIs anymore. Just one code base. Essentially, Flow is a set of libraries. So it's a framework that is composed of a series of libraries, each library being cross-platform. So let's look at the libraries we have right now. We have a library for networking. We have a library for, of course, basic stuff like JSON and base64 encoding and decoding. We have digest algorithms. We have a key value storage API. We have something for location management. That's very important when you do mobile development. You want to access the location of your device. We have a small library for task scheduling. I will talk about it further. And finally, we have a very big library called UI that lets you write a user interface. So let's look a little bit about what you can do in Flow. This is a basic net GET request using HTTPS. So you can write that code in Flow, and it will work on iOS and Android. So of course, this code has been implemented twice in Flow. We have an implementation for iOS and implementation for Android. But we did the work for you, and you can just type this in your project, and it will work on both platforms. So that's very cool. Of course, you can do GET, but you can do POST request as well. So it's a bit more complicated because you have to pass this option hash, but essentially it's the same. So that's very cool. You can also check for the reachability of a host. So that's very important when you do mobile dev. You basically want to know if your website is reachable or not. And if it's not reachable, you want to present a different user interface to your customer. So we support that in our net library. We have a JSON API that lets you create and parse JSON files. So this API is the same as the one you have in CRuby. So you won't have any surprise here, but we support that. Of course, this code has been also implemented twice. One we have an implementation for iOS and one for Android. But you don't have to care about that. You can just use JSON.load and toJSON. We have support for all the most famous DHS algorithms, so MD5, SHA-1, and others. So again, we actually implemented the same API as CRuby here. We have base64 APIs to encode and decode base64 strings. We have a storage API. So it's a very simple key value storage API. So you can store values based on keys using the store class. And you can have access to all the information you store, and you can delete specific information. So this is very simple. And on iOS, it's using NSUser defaults, and on Android, it's using I think it's the project settings singleton. So you can store information about your project using this API. So about location, using Flow, you can start monitoring the location of your device, and you can stop when you don't need that anymore. And you will have access to the default information about the location, such as the coordinates, latitude, longitude, the altitude, the speed of the location information, the accuracy, this kind of thing. So all the stuff that you expect. You can also do reverse geocoding. So it allows you from an existing name, a name of a place mark, to retrieve all the information about that address. For example, you can geocode Apple Inc., and it will give you the name of the company, the address, the locality, the postal code, the country, the area, these kind of things. So that's also very important. We have in the task library, we have timers APIs. So this allows you to schedule something after a given direction or every given durations. So for example, in the first snippet, we will execute the code after 0.5 seconds. And we only execute it once. On the second example, we will execute the code every 2.5 seconds. So this will be scheduled as a timer. And you can stop any timer that you created if you wish. So that's very useful. If you've done a bit of iOS programming, or sorry, mobile programming, you know that timers are very important. You want, for instance, to show a splash screen of your application, and you want to wait, for example, 1 or 2 seconds, then you want to switch to a different screen. So you can use this timer API for that. We also have an API to schedule stuff in the main thread. So if you have code in a separate thread and you want to dispatch stuff to the main thread, you can use task.main, and the block will be dispatched to the main thread. So that's important. That's important, for example, everything you do that's UI related has to be in the main thread. So you can use this method. And finally, we have the task.background, a method that allows you to schedule anything on the background thread. On iOS, we use grandson dispatch or libdispatch for that. On Android, we use a pool of executor threads. which is mostly similar in design. So basically, any block that you provide to that method will be dispatched in parallel. You don't need to care about creating threads or allocating a pool of threads. We will do that for you. And we have the concept of sequential queues. Sequential queues are basically an object where you can schedule jobs, and every job will be executed after the previous job has been done. So for example, in this very specific code snippet, we have 3 schedule dispatch, and job 1 will be performed first, and then job 2 will be performed after job 1, and job 3 will be performed after job 2. So they will all be sequential. And finally, you can wait for all jobs to finish. So let's talk about the UI. UI is very big. UI is it's a set of cross-platform classes for UI components. And also, it's also a cross-platform layout system. So it's basically 2 things. UI is the biggest library of Flow. If you look at the classes that we define, we'll find the usual suspects of any widget library. So we have Flow as the concept of a UI view, which is the root class of everything. So you will find in Flow a UI button, UI text input, UI label, UI image, UI table. You will find a smaller objects that are used as API arguments, such as a UI color, a UI font. Of course, Flow also has the concept of navigation, screens, and the concept of an application. And we have more classes as well. But more specifically, Flow has a layout system. Flow lets you lay out your user interface using a CSS style, a CSS DSL Ruby API that is following Flexbox. So if you know Flexbox because you're a web developer, you can use Flow directly to provide the layout of your user interface. And the thing about the layout of Flow is that it is a cross-platform unique implementation. So we have a cross-platform implementation for Flexbox that we use in Flow. That doesn't use iOS auto layout or Android layout classes. So the stuff that you write in Flow using our layout system will exactly look the same on iOS and Android. So you won't have any surprises. You won't have like one widget that is offset to another one in Android. Everything will look exactly the same because we have the same implementation. And if you want to know more about that, Flow actually uses the same CSS Flexbox thing that React Native uses. So we actually use the same project for that. It's a project called CSS Layout, and we basically integrated it in Flow. So for example, based on a view, you can set the width and the height of your view, as well as the position, X, Y, these kind of things. You can specify padding, margin, and border. So these are information that you can set on your view to make sure that there is enough room for the other views. And of course, you have the Flexbox settings. So as you can specify flex 0 or 1 for your view. If you set 1, it means that it's going to take as much size as possible. And then you have a bunch of things that even myself don't know much because I'm not really a web developer. But we support all of that for you. And I will show you a demo right after. Actually, no, the demo is right now. So I will show you a little bit how Flow is working. So this is my computer here. And I have here RubyMotion, which is an Android emulator, and I have my iPhone simulator here. So the first thing I will do is show you my project here. I have a Flow project here. This is the definition of a Flow screen. A screen is basically a screen of your application. On Android, it's going to be a fragment of your main activity, and on iOS, it's going to be a view controller. So we have the concept of screens. On load is going to be called when the screen loads from the manager, and here we will create a view. We'll set the flex attribute to 1. We set the margin to 25, We'll set the background color to white. We'll set the background view to the main view of our screen. Then you don't pay attention to this because it's commented, so don't look, right? And here we basically keep the reference to our view as a global variable here. I use a global variable because I can then access it from the REPL. So I will show it to you right now. For flow, we have a special REPL called a super REPL. You will see right away. So here, basically, I have a REPL. If I type an expression, as you can see, I have two results here, 6 and 6. Why do I have two results here? It's because my REPL here is connected to Android and iOS. So if I type an expression, it's going to be executed on both processes. If I ask for the class of an array, it's array on both. But then if I get the superclass, you can see that here the first one is Android and the second one is iOS, because we actually rebased the built-in Ruby classes on top of native objects. So an array in Android is a Java util abstract list, and on iOS it's an MS mutable array. Anyway, from here I have access to my BG global variable, and for example I can set the background color to blue, and boom, it changes automatically, as you can see here, my background color. So that's pretty cool. So let's put it back to white, and let's try to write a very simple application here. I will create a label, my favorite food. I added a label here. As you can see, it appears on both iOS and Android. My favorite food. I can set the text alignment to center, so that's a little bit better. Now the label is centered. Now I'm going to create a list, and I will just set flex to 1, but I will not change the list right now. So I can do this, then update my layout. So you don't see it, but there is a list here. Because it's empty, you don't see anything yet. Now I'm going to create an input. To 20, maybe 30. Placeholder. Name of food, and I put it here. As you can see, I have here an input text, and here I have an input text, right there. Now I'm going to create a button. So now I have created a hard button, and right now if I click it, it doesn't do anything because I didn't connect a handler yet. But I can do that right now. I can connect a tab block that will be called when my button is called, and from there I can set something. I can append something to the data source on our list, which will be the text from the input. Oh, it it works, as you can see. So I can type stuff. Sorry. So as you can see, that pretty much works, and that's I build this very simple app in the terminal here in our REPL, and the same application works on iOS and Android. So you may wonder, this is very cool, and this is all Flexbox layout, but this is very simple. So can you actually build more important application with that? And the answer is yes. We actually so we've been doing some consulting work for a big pharmaceutical company, and we built this project, which is an application for a big pharmaceutical company to track logistic beacons. So I don't really have time to show you the application, but we have the concept of a list view here. The whole application is written in Flow, so that's only one code base, and here you can pre-select things, and with the concept of team here. So, for example, these screens are the same code base. This is Android, this is iOS. So, as you can see, it's possible to write something more important in Flow than the basic stuff I show you. So without that, I will go back to the slides. So that was Flow, a demo, and Flow is a feature that we've been working on. It's completely open source, so we are working on it in the open. So if you want to try Flow, you can go on github/gitbyte/flow. And first you need to install RubyMotion, then you can just start using Flow. As you can see, it's very early, but it's actually used. We use it in production, as I said. We do some consulting for companies from time to time, and we actually use it to build a few applications. So it's already used, and we are actively working on it. So we work on it on a weekly basis, and the goal is to release the first version this month, a version that anyone can use. So it will normally be at the 15th of this month, so in about 2 weeks. So if you are interested in mobile development in Ruby, I highly recommend to go on GitHub, and you can start the project. Then you will get a notification when the first release is out, and you can try that. The goal of Flow is to include it in RubyMotion 5 once it's fully completed. Right now it's still in development, so we add new features when we need them. As soon as we know that Flow is more or less complete, we will integrate it in RubyMotion so that you don't have to install the gem anymore. It will be built in. So please give it a try. We're really looking for people to try Flow to actually find out if stuff is missing or if bugs exist, so that we can fix them before the main release for everyone. So please help us if you can. So what's RubyMotion precisely? As I said on this presentation, it's a static out-of-time compiler. It's 2 runtimes, 2 implementation of Ruby. It's a build system based on Rake, and it's a REPL. And of course, no, it's something else. It's a cross-platform framework. This is Flow, the stuff I show you. So RubyMotion is all of this. So let's recap. RubyMotion is fun, hopefully. I hope that I managed to convince you that it's great. And please download RubyMotion if you can. We would really be happy if you do so, and if you tell us what we should improve. Again, this is the URL to download RubyMotion, rubymotion.com/download. It's completely free, so you can give it a try. And thank you. So from there, we can have some questions.
All right. Thank you, Laurent, for that great presentation and taking us through a demo of everything. So we would like our audience to please start typing in your questions, and we already have a couple of questions, so we would start taking them up. But before that, I would just like to say that Laurent, we have got a lot of support and excitement for Flow from a lot of our listeners, and a lot of them think that Flow is really awesome and would really like to try that out. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And so now coming up to the questions. So the first question we've got here is there any work being done to be able to use Cocoa pods written in Swift?
Cocoa pods written in Swift, not yet. So we support all the Cocoa pods written in Objective-C, of course, but we don't support Swift pods yet. So we are actually, so the main issue is that supporting Swift will take a bit of time for us because we need to basically reverse engineer what Swift is doing. And right now we don't see that Swift is being really adopted that much, especially for libraries. Sorry, I drank too much tea too fast. But basically we are not doing it yet. We might wait for this year's WWDC Apple's conferences to see more or less what's happening with Swift. If it's being promoted or these kind of things, but it's definitely on the roadmap. But right now we're not supporting it.
All right. Next up, is there any work being done to be able to compile RubyMotion Android apps on Windows or Linux?
This hasn't been done as well. I know that a couple of people were interested about that. They would be mostly interested to use RubyMotion for Android to do server applications. But the thing is that again, it's a time limit. We only have 4 people working on RubyMotion, me included, so we can't do everything. Sorry. So that's also not something we are planning to do very, very soon. If there is a big demand, we might do something. As far as we know, right now the big demand is to get RubyMotion working on Windows. A lot of people are asking us to use Windows as a platform instead of the Mac to write mobile apps. But getting RubyMotion for Android running on Windows or Linux is, I would not say it's a priority unless there is a significant number of people interested to do that.
Okay, the next question is main activity a default class that we need to have like main function C?
Actually, yeah, by default, yes, you need to have a class name. You need to have a class named main activity in your RubyMotion for Android project. You can change that in the reg file. You can specify the name of the default activity. And it is the same as in Java. So if you do Android development in Java, in the Android manifest, you need to specify the name of the main activity. And I think by default, it is main activity as well. So essentially, yes, main activity is more or less the same as main in C. It's an entry point. The equivalent in iOS would be the application delegate.
Okay. The next question, which I think you have answered to a big extent with Flow, was that RubyMotion simply provides an option to write code in Ruby, but we will still have to maintain 2 different code bases. So as with Flow, you would now have to maintain only one single code base. Am I right?
Yep, absolutely. So we know that problem. We know that a lot of people have this problem right now. So we try to, hopefully we will fix them with Flow. With Flow, you won't have to maintain 2 code bases. You will only have 1 code base for iOS and Android, and only 1 set of APIs.
Okay. The next, what is the advantage or disadvantage of using RubyMotion over, let's say, PhoneGap or Ionic framework?
The advantage of using RubyMotion over PhoneGap or Ionic is that with RubyMotion you have native. You can access the entire set of platform APIs exactly from Ruby. So everything that you can do in Objective-C, Swift, or Java, you can do in RubyMotion. You can access the entire set of Apple API or Google APIs. You cannot do that in PhoneGap or Ionic. You have to use very specific JavaScript wrappers to call very specific subset of features. So you're kind of limited in that. Also, in RubyMotion, you get machine code binaries out of your project. So when you build your project in RubyMotion, you get a binary that you can ship to the App Store or to people. With Ionic and PhoneGap, your application will run inside the JavaScript virtual machine on separate threads. So that's also very different. You don't get the same kind of integration with the platform. And finally, I would say that so accessing the APIs, you get a machine code binary. So that's pretty much it. Also, the thing is that RubyMotion is a runtime, a Ruby runtime that is also completely reentrant. So if you can actually build a very complex application in RubyMotion that spans different threads, that computes jobs in parallel. You cannot really do that in JavaScript because the JavaScript virtual machine is pretty much limited. So you would not be able to do that in PhoneGap or other related technologies. So that's the advantages. The drawbacks are that RubyMotion is a bit harder to learn. So there is a learning curve because you need to become a mobile developer basically. So you need to know a bit about the platforms that you develop for. Even if Flow is trying to fix that problem, even in Flow you will essentially need to know a bit about IIS and Android. PhoneGap tries to wrap everything with, as far as I know, HTML, web views, these kind of things. So PhoneGap is much easier to learn than RubyMotion. So the drawback of RubyMotion is the learning curve, but I think it is worth it. Once you are able to overcome the learning curve, you should be able to write very interesting applications in RubyMotion.
Okay. Also, there's another question about how does RubyMotion compare to React?
Oh, it's pretty React Native, right?
Yes.
Again, I guess it is the same thing I said. Compared to React Native, React Native has native in the name, but it's not really native in the sense that React Native doesn't allow you to call all the platform APIs, and also you don't have like a native integration with the underlying runtime. So in React Native, your application also runs on a JavaScript virtual machine that is single-threaded, so you're kind of limited as well. So that's the difference, the main difference between RubyMotion, which is a real native toolchain and real native environment, than React Native, which is something inside the JavaScript virtual machine that calls into Objective-C or Java modules to call a certain subset of APIs. So that's the main difference. The thing about React Native, we looked a lot about React Native because it's very hype at this moment. And in React Native, there is this thing that we actually stole in a way under quotes for Flow. It is the CSS Flexbox model. I think this is very we personally think it's a brilliant idea to have a unique CSS Flexbox DSL to layout user interface. So right now in the React Native, this is what they use, and we kind of stole it for Flow. So as I was showing. And also, as I was saying during my presentation, we use the same code base. It's a code base called CSS Layout. It's a project, and we basically used it to re-architecture Flow. So in a way, we try to take the good things of React Native and kind of put them back to RubyMotion. We also have a code reloading functionality that I didn't show right now because it's still under development. But our REPL is able to detect the files that are being changed and reload them on demand. So that's pretty cool. That will be a feature of RubyMotion 5, but I didn't show it today. But again, this is a feature that we developed mostly because of React Native, something that we found was great in React Native. So in a way, difference between React Native and RubyMotion are essentially that RubyMotion lets you, with RubyMotion you have a fully native environment, while React Native is pretty much separate. And we try to kind of backport the nice feature that we like from React Native to RubyMotion so that the environment gets modern. So I hope that it answered the questions.
All right. We have another question that asks, does RubyMotion support JavaScript?
I don't really understand the question. So you can, of course, integrate with JavaScript. So it is possible with RubyMotion to build hybrid apps. So you can basically build the navigations in RubyMotion, so using native APIs. And then you can have web views inside and have JavaScript code. So that's possible. As far as I know, the very first Basecamp application, mobile application, was written in RubyMotion using that strategy. So they were using web views inside a native navigation theme. Eventually, they decided to get rid of RubyMotion and do everything in web views, which is, in my opinion, a mistake, but I'm not going to judge them. So if the question is, can you actually access the JavaScript runtime inside web views? Yes, absolutely. You can write full-fledged hybrid apps in RubyMotion. I would not personally recommend it. I would personally recommend to go native if you can, because native screens provide a much better user experience for your users. But I agree that sometimes in a complex application, you might have several screens that could be written with web views. For example, if you don't have time to do them properly native, or maybe if the information from the screens come from the internet and you want to generate these screens programmatically, then maybe having HTML with some CSS is faster than rebuilding the UI programmatically. So, but anyway, we support the JavaScript engines that are on iOS and Android. Again, everything you can do in Java or Objective-C, you can do in RubyMotion. So if Objective-C or Java allows you to interface with JavaScript, we can do exactly the same thing.
All right. The next question is, does it have a post-GRE?
A cost here?
Post-GRE. P-O-S-T-G-R-E.
I guess, I'm sorry, I don't understand. A post?
I mean, that is the question that I have in front of me, is, does it have... Okay, so I have a... Okay, the question is, does it have Postgres, G-R-E-S, P-O-S-T-G-R-E-S?
G-R... Ah, Postgres.
Yeah, Postgres.
Oh, Postgres, sorry. Postgres. Yeah. Yes, you can have access to Postgres libraries. So I'm not very familiar with Postgres on mobile. Normally on mobile, I think people use more SQLite 3. So you can definitely access SQLite from RubyMotion. Postgres on mobile, I'm not sure. To be honest, I never heard about it, but if there is a library, there is a way to access it from RubyMotion, yes. So for that, I would recommend to maybe open a discussion on our forum and kind of describe that you want to use Postgres on mobile and you find this library, and someone can help you integrate it in RubyMotion.
Okay, that's great. So we are really running towards the end of the webinar, and if you have any more questions, please write them to us at webinars@srijan.in, and we will take them up with Laurent, and he will get back to you with the answers. But right now I have a couple of questions in front of me, which I'm going to quickly take up. So is it possible to use Interface Builder or Android Studio with Flow?
With Flow, so it is possible to use Interface Builder in RubyMotion. There is a gem called IB that you can install. So gem install IB, and this gem basically interfaces with Xcode and creates like a fake project that lets you in Xcode to build a UI, and then you can expose the outlet and actions to Ruby code. So it's pretty much magical, but it works. So you can access IB from RubyMotion, and for Android Studio, what you only have to do is basically generate those XML files and put them in the resource directory of your RubyMotion project. So now the question is about integrating IB and Android Studio with Flow, and that I might not be able to answer that question at this point because I don't really know. Flow is basically something different than this, so it's a different type of project. So I'm not sure if you would actually want to mix IDE or Android Studio with Flow. The thing is, Flow is cross-platform, so everything you do with Flow has to work on iOS and Android. Otherwise, there is pretty much no point in using Flow. So as soon as you start using IB with a Flow project, you're automatically limited to iOS because IB doesn't work on Android. So you pretty much lose the point of using Flow. But if it answers the person's questions, you can definitely use Android Studio to lay out user interface or interface builder with a RubyMotion project. So for IB there is a gem called IB simply. So gem install IB, and for Android Studio we don't have a gem because there is no need to have a gem. You can just build a UI and just copy the XML files in the resource directory of your RubyMotion for Android project. Again, I just wanted to tell the audience here, if you have any questions, more specific questions, we have a community forum, so you can ask them there. For example, how do I integrate Android Studio XML files? We can help you, for instance.
Okay, so I have 3 last questions here in front of me, which I'm going to quickly take up. Does it have a web view-like component? So if we open, so to allow us to open URLs or HTML files?
Yes, we have. There is a web view. So yeah, you can have web views in RubyMotion projects. Yes. And for Flow, we have a UI web class that is cross-platform. So you can have HTML in a portable way, so for iOS and Android.
Okay, and the last 2 questions is, does RubyMotion support MongoDB, and does it have a tablet view?
MongoDB, again, I'm not sure. I don't know if they have a mobile version. So again, if there is a mobile version of MongoDB, we can definitely support it probably. So again, I encourage the person to do some research, and if they find that there is a mobile version, to contact us so that we can help to integrate it in RubyMotion. And when it comes to the tablet view, I'm not sure I understand the question, but RubyMotion definitely lets you build any kind of native apps, specifically an iPad app or an Android tablet app. So, and again, everything you can do in Objective-C or Java, you can do in RubyMotion. So I know that there are different type of layouts that you can use when you build a richer application for an iPad or an Android tablet, and you can do that in RubyMotion as well. So there is pretty much no limitation here. There are actually several very interesting applications made in RubyMotion specifically for tablets. With application for children, with application for scientific users, for management people, that are all built using iPads, mostly iPads. So basically, yeah. So you can write tablet application in RubyMotion, definitely.
And also, if whatever you write in RubyMotion would be responsive to the device in terms of whatever device you are using?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, so and with that we have come to the end of our session today, and it was really great to have all the questions, and thank you, Laurent, for answering all of the questions so patiently. And if any of our attendees have any more questions, you can ask them on the RubyMotion forum, and also send them to us at webinars@srijan.in or tweet Laurent directly, and I'm sure he will get back to you with all the answers. And once again, it was really great to have you all at the session, and I would just like to inform all our participants that you will get a mail soon with the presentation slides and the video of the session. So that's there. And I would also like to inform you about our next session, which is going to be about Drupal console, and it is going to be held on the 15th of June 2016. For registrations and more details, you'll be getting a mail from our site, so stay tuned. And thank you once again, everyone, for joining us today, and hope to see you at our next webinar.
Thank you for inviting me. Thanks.